All right, welcome everyone to Apex and OData, REST data sources to your service. This is another Apex office hours, and today is November 17th, and my name is Jason Haynes. I'm a principal product manager for Oracle Apex, and I'm live here from Florida, United States. And we're gonna go ahead and start with a couple announcements. So some announcements and updates follows with the fact that, hey, Apex 22.2 is now available as of last week. You can download it now and install it on-prem, install it on your laptop. It's going to be available everywhere on OCI in just a couple of weeks, including the whole, paid tier and all that. But it is currently available for new accounts on OCI. So definitely take advantage of learning how to use Apex 22.2. If you don't want to go on any of those other services to play with Apex 22.2, you can go to apex.oracle.com and use Apex 22.2 today. So Apex Office Hours, we just finished the series of Apex 22.2 with the sneak preview and what's new, the marquee features, new items and regions, more information about PWA, user and developer experience, and they're all available at apex.oracle.com/office hours. All these office hours are recorded and are available on demand. So as far as Apex events, you can see several events this past month. We have office hours in Spanish next Thursday, and then the 1st of December, we'll be seeing the UK OUG Breakthrough Conference. So it's very exciting. Don't forget to visit the Apex Ideas and Feature Request app at apex.oracle.com/ideas. Take a look at what the rest of the community is posting as requests for new ideas and features. Comment. Let us know that you're supporting some of these ideas by voting on them, but comments are very encouraged. We want to hear more about what's going on in the community, why certain features are requested or desired. It's just one of those things where the more interactive you are, the more involved you are, the better for the idea. With Apex 22.2 in our release notes, we have over 20 new features that have been delivered in Apex 22.2 that are a direct result from the last year of this application taking in submissions and having us review them and figure out how what we can put into the next version of Apex. And there's going to be more, right? 23.1 is going to be coming around within the next 6 to 8 months here in the spring of 2023. So who knows what new ideas that are going to be submitted here will be showing up in that new release of Apex. So today we have special guests Karsten Starsky and Moritz Klein to discuss Apex and OData, REST data sources to your service. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Karsten, who will start first, and then Moritz. Thank you, guys. Looking forward to learning more about this.
Thank you very much, Jason. And today we will talk, today's office hour session for the next 45 minutes, maybe a bit longer. We will talk about REST, and not only about REST, about OData. And for everybody who's new to that term, OData is sort of an industry standard for REST APIs. And this is commonly used for SAP and Microsoft, but also for other REST API endpoints. And OData is more than you would expect from a REST API where you send a post or a put request to, right? OData is a full standard set, which describes if you are getting data from a REST API, not only just get data. Also, I want to filter. I want to order. Lots more of ways how to interact with that REST API. And before we are getting into the details of the OData support in Apex, I would first get everybody on the same page what REST support in Apex actually means. So what does it mean if we are talking about Apex consuming or Apex talking to a REST API? And we have 170 attendees here. I'm pretty sure a lot of folks already know about what you can do with REST and Apex, but maybe others don't, right? So let me first take the opportunity to give you a few minutes, an introduction, what REST and Apex actually means, so that we are all on the same page. And then we can have a look in what does that mean when we are talking about Apex supports OData, right? And first, I put together just a handful of slides. First, let me show you a bit how REST support in Apex developed over the years, right? And the first release, which was really remarkable, in regards of REST support was Apex 18. Before that, there was also some sort of REST support, but it was very, very basic, right? With Apex 18.1, we were introducing REST data sources. At that time, it was called web source modules, but it was the same as REST data sources. And REST data sources is the basic thing when we are talking about REST or Apex reaching out to an external REST API. A REST data source is the Apex. So it's the Apex component which represents an external REST endpoint, right? So everything is Apex stores all its information about an external REST endpoint as a REST data source. And that is the URL, the HTTP method, right? Headers, URL parameters. What comes back from the REST API? Is it XML? Is it JSON? Is it something else? How is the response to be parsed? So all you need to know to talk to the REST API and to understand the response of the REST API, all that is stored as a REST data source in Apex, right? And 18.1 was the introduction of REST data sources and also the support for read-only components at that time. So reports, charts, nothing else. A year later, we added in DML support. So the form region was able to perform insert, update, delete directly on a REST data source. 19.2, we added interactive grid and shared LOEs. 22 was a big and important release, especially for our session today, right? Because with 22, we introduced REST source plugins, right? And we will get to that in a minute, right? REST source plugins allow the developer to really build a customized implementation for an external REST API. So let's assume, right, the REST API expects more than just a specific set of HTTP parameters. Maybe given on what the Apex component needs, right, very special requests have to be crafted to the external REST API. So interactive report might want to see rows 101, 101 to 200. You exactly need those 200 rows. You need, or many REST APIs require very specific requests to get you exactly those 100 rows. A plugin allows you to do that, right? We will get to that. Plugins are a very central piece of our session today, right? 21.1, we introduced the ability to fetch CSV data over REST. 21.2, we introduced REST source catalogs. So you can have a catalog of REST data source templates, which you can share across workspaces. So if some author of a catalog can create a catalog, can prepare all the REST data source templates with all the required parameters, the URL templates, the HTTP methods, distribute that among the company colleagues who are building the Apex applications, or just picking up the catalog and then build REST data sources without having to declare every little detail over and over again. Right? 21.2 also declarative REST pagination for the standard REST data source type. And with 22.2, we built a special integration. So there is an own REST data source type for OData REST-enabled SQL now. In 22.2, I have to say there are not too much new or no new large things regarding REST. We have the search region in 22.2, which you heard about in the previous office hours, and that has support for REST. But REST sources as such didn't see too much new functionality in 22.2. Okay, so let's circle again a bit to what a REST data source is, right? And as I was saying before, a REST data source contains all the metadata about the external REST API, right? So as I was saying, URLs, parameters, HTTP headers, response format, all the know-how of Apex is part of the REST data source. And if an Apex component like a report is created on top of a REST data source, Apex knows everything so that Apex can do the HTTP request on its own, right? So you don't, as a developer, you don't have to do the HTTP request yourself. You don't have to parse the JSON. Apex does everything for you, right? It's part of the application. And you can combine it with in several ways, right? So when you have a REST data source and you get data back from a REST data source, every component allows you to use post-processing SQL so that you can further convert the data, you can join the data from a REST source to a local table and other stuff. And also since 20.2, you can synchronize data from your REST data source to a local table in your schema, or declaratively, right? You just configure synchronization, you configure the method, the interval, and Apex takes care of everything, right? Really without any coding. Now let's talk a bit about plugins, right? And plugins gets into the area of how far does Apex understand the REST API? So the basic thing is, as I was saying before, right, we store information about the URL, parameters, responses, and so on. But there is more, right? So for instance, when you look at an orgs REST API, so we can go to the database actions or SQL Workshop and REST services, and you can create your own REST APIs using orgs. And even orgs has a feature set which allows you to do filtering on the server. So you're requesting data from the REST API and you're passing filters along, right? So that the REST API from the get-go only delivers a reduced result set, right? Same for sorting. And that is hooked up in Apex since the very first day. So when you create an interactive report on a REST data source, the end user comes ahead, runs your interactive report. Oh, let me configure a few filters. Oh, only department 10. Oh, only salary is greater than 3,000. Those filters are pushed down to the REST API because Org supports it and Apex knows how it works, right? Apex knows how to translate these filters to a syntax which Org understands. And that is built into Apex. Same thing, we have Fusion SaaS services where Apex understands how the pagination works. For OCI, so Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, for these REST APIs, Apex understands how the pagination works. For REST-enabled SQL queries, Apex understands how filters and pagination works. And here is the part where OData comes into the picture, right? OData also allows to send filters along with your request, right? So that filtering happens on the REST API side and not that everything is downloaded and Apex has to do all of this. Sorting, pagination. Your REST API works potentially on a data set with 1 million of rows, right? You don't want to download everything all the time, right? You're only interested in rows 1 to 100. So you only want to request those. Then you are advancing to the next page in your interactive report. You now want to see rows 101 to 200, but only those, not all the under 900,000. And this is also, every REST API or REST APIs have different means on how this pagination works, right? Orgs, some third-party REST API, and OData has a standard set around these things, right? So the OData is a standard set around a lot of things. And parts of that is the pagination, the server-side filtering, and the sorting. And a plugin developer can now craft an implementation, right, which is able to translate interactive report filters, for instance, to the syntax which the very REST service understands. The plugin is able to translate, right, the request of Apex to get me rows 101 to 200 to a syntax which the other REST API understands. The plugin developer can code a plugin so that discovery is supported. So when you're creating a REST data source, the plugin code can provide discovery results, right? So that the plugin knows, oh, for that kind of endpoint, these columns are the ones which Apex is interested in. A plugin can do all of that, right? And that is what MTAG and Oracle built together during the last weeks and months to craft the plugin, right? And Moritz will talk about all the details, which is able to talk to OData REST APIs. And we are talking about exactly those things, right? So an interactive report filter is translated by the plugin to something which the OData REST API actually understands, right? Okay, first, before I hand over to Moritz, let me quickly show you a few things. Where is stuff in Apex? So I have an empty Apex application here, and I also have a sample plugin which I once built, right? And that is, for instance, that's Google Books, right? And let me walk you once through the process how you actually work with a REST data source plugin. I will not use the OData plugin now. that is something which Moritz will show. I will just show you the very basic steps, right? So we want to work with a REST data source plugin. So plugins are in shared components, plugins. There we are. And now let me import a plugin, right? And I have it on my desktop. And I once built a plugin to interact with the Google Books REST API, right? So first thing I have to do is import the plugin, right? So, and there we are. And as always, that's how all the plugins work, right? We have the metadata about the plugin. We have PL/SQL code here. That's the implementation of the plugin. And for every plugin, we have the callbacks. So see, when Apex, we want Apex to use that plugin when the interactive report fetches data from your REST API. So Apex defines a few callbacks, a few interfaces, if you will, right? So, and the fetch procedure is a very important one because that procedure is called when the interactive report requests rows from the REST data source, right? Interactive report requests the rows from the Apex engine, and the Apex engine sees, oh, it's a plugin. Let me call the plugin fetch procedure. And then it goes into the plugin code. The plugin code does whatever it does and gives data back to Apex. And Apex gives it back to the interactive report, and tada, you see results, right? There is also a discover procedure, a capabilities, DML, and execute procedures, right? Okay, so we have the plugin. Let me then quickly create a new REST data source. So now I create a new one. And now I don't use the built-in types. I have a new one here. That's my plugin. And the plugin also can propose an endpoint URL. It's nice, right? This is also good, right? Google Books doesn't require authentication, and this already comes from my plugin, right? And let me create a REST data source. See, looks exactly as with a built-in type, right? And we can now have a look. And this is what the plugin built for me. Let me finally create an interactive report on top of that. And then we have the Google Books API in action. Save that, run the interactive report. So didn't search for anything. So let me search for Oracle Apex books. And there we are. Here are the Oracle Apex books. And what the plugin now does, so whenever the interactive report requested rows, the plugin implementation went through. And what this plugin actually supports is the pagination scheme, right? So the interactive report doesn't even notice anything, right? So I fetch rows 1 to 50, I fetch rows 51 to 100, right? And believe me, Google Books doesn't give you 100 rows at once, right? There is a pagination schemes behind that. And transparently, the plugin executes 1 or maybe 2 or maybe 3 HTTP requests to get you those rows you're actually interested in, right? All that pagination is done by the plugin. And also these columns, which I didn't do anything for discovery, right? I just accepted what I got. The rest, the JSON response for that API looks different, right? So the plugin does a bit of curating, right? And the plugin selected a subset of columns, which I'm seeing here, right? So that's basically how it works. That's how every REST data source plugin works. And you can adopt to the specialities of every REST API just by offering a plugin. And that's what MTAG and what our friends from MTAG did over the last weeks, right? So they offered a bit of a larger plugin. It's more than these 50 lines of PL/SQL code, which I offered here. And that plugin is able to interact with an OData REST data source and to leverage all the capabilities which OData provides, which is way more than a bit of pagination like on the Google Books side here. And with those words, I would hand over to Moritz. And Moritz, I'm now curious on the details of the OData plugin. Take it away.
Yeah, Fine. So thank you, Carsten, for the overview. I will pick up here. Let's get started. So there we are. What I will do, first of all, is how do I get up running as easy as possible? So thankfully, the link that I'm about to show you was already posted, so I don't have to post it again. So you navigate to the GitHub repository over here inside to REST sources, OData REST APIs. And first of all, get the zip file here, which is the exported demo application. That's the easiest way. I have downloaded this already, so I will just, in a fresh instance that workspace is empty, just import the application. So let's see, auto sign. That's fine here. Let's go on. Make sure you leave install supporting objects enabled. I'll explain later why. And just install the application. So, got installed. Let's run it. Okay, this is how the demo application looks like. So on first you get some information on what is actually OData. So you can click there. There's also included certain like the protocol specification, certain conventions, how this actually looks like. So if you're interested how an OData REST source actually gives you the data and what it should conform to, you can read up on that. And then we have a couple of examples built in. So I will just open this interactive report here. So this is one of the demo endpoints. So this works immediately with an interactive report in here. I can also utilize filtering. Let's say I just filter here. Yeah, that takes a while. Yeah, so that works. And depending on the data source that you have, it could very well be this filter is not run on your side after fetching all the data, but already at the source and you only fetch a subset. That's one of the reasons why you want to have a specific plugin. I'll just go through a bit of the components. So interactive grid actually works the same. This is actually also set up fetch as you go. You see it runs a bit. Faceted search also works. So this is sort of the easiest way to get you up and running. Everything is pre-configured with public endpoints. And if you click on REST sources, this is a small selection of public demo endpoints or REST sources that you can look into and try out also. What we've also written here, this comes in handy pretty soon, is what those data sources support. So in the OData standard, there's a couple of things that are optional for the endpoint to support. And this is something that you have to look up. We did it for those samples for you. And this is needed when you set it up. So easy enough, I can look at the demo application, look at the samples, that's fine. But what if I'm creating a new application? Let's quickly do that. So let's quickly create an application. Don't need anything special here. And then the first step that you do is actually, well, you need the plugin. The easiest way to get it, and that's how I started right now, is import the sample application that we have because it includes everything. And then in your next application, go to create a plugin, say copy of existing, pick the installed sample app. And then here you can keep everything, copy and subscribe, that's fine. Let's copy the plugin. So I have the plugin ready, which means I can also now use the plugin for REST data sources that I want to create. And that's the process that we're going through right now. So let's create a REST data source. I will do this from scratch, yes. First step here, choose the right type. And now that I have the plugin, I can actually pick OData REST service as a plugin. I will select that, give this one a name. I'll use the North Winds example. It's a nice flashback to the old access times, whoever remembers that. And let me put in the URL endpoint. So that's the first step here. Give it a URL endpoint, give it a name, choose the right data source type. So, okay, I have the remote server already. So picked it up from the base URL. That's because I have the sample app installed. Should look similar on your side also. So let's go next. Next thing that it's asked is a so-called resource path. OData works in a way that you have a specific endpoint, which gives you access to a whole lot of things. And in this case, I'm interested in the orders stuff. So I'll put in here the orders resource path. That's something that you need to check out with the endpoint that you're targeting. What are valid resource paths? So we ask for this. It's a mandatory thing, so you shouldn't be able to miss it. This is public. I don't need an authentication. So as easy as that, I can now discover. What happens in behind the scenes? So this is a sort of the standard discovery. However, OData delivers metadata about the structure of your objects and all the stuff. And this is what is parsed during the discovery step to find out as much as possible about data types. So OData delivers you right out of the box. This is a number in a defined schema. It's actually pretty funny because the metadata is specified in XML, but we're talking REST normally. So I can now just create it. Now that I have created it, it was created with a set of default settings that I might need to change. So the basic options here and some other advanced options that I need to look up. So let me quickly check my cheat sheet here. So what I know on that data source, because I did the research up front, well, other people did it and gave it to me. I know the source will support ordering. What that means is when the Apex component asks for a specific sorting, we can push it to the source. It can be done there, and we don't have to pull all the stuff and order afterwards. It will support querying specific columns. So if we only ask for 2 columns, we only collect those 2 and not everything that's defined. I know is row searching is not available on that source. That is pretty much, that could be helpful, but not everything supports it. The main point that you probably should look for if you have the client-driven pagination. So that's the stuff that Carsten also said before, like pagination, if that's known, that really helps. And then there's a couple of additional things that I can set, like if I want to filter case insensitive, how does that work on the other side? Do I have to just run lowercase on everything and compare it like that? Does it have something specific? I can configure this here. And that's one of the biggest goals with the plugin is there's a lot of options with OData. However, you don't need to code it. you can declaratively say, yes, this source supports following things, and the plugin code will take care of the rest. So I've created a REST data source. Then you get back to just quickly creating a page. Interactive report is probably the easiest way. Let's call it orders. We're using a REST data source. Normal window, fine. And there it is. Looks pretty similar to what we had in the demo, in the sample application, because I've used an endpoint that we already had there. Yeah. So as easy as that, you have access to the stuff, and then you can start filtering on things. So what would be next step is like, okay, how does this work? So what's done in behind the scenes? So maybe if you're curious and you like to develop stuff and look into stuff that was developed, so you're like me, it's like, okay, let's open the plugin. Let's see. Well, this here is empty. I would have normally looked into that. So that's sort of a bit different from what you're used to with plugins. Reason being the code that we have in behind here. Not sure why callbacks is. Let me go to the main part of the plugin. I think that's the reason why I cannot see the callbacks. Yes, yeah. If you look here, the callbacks point to specific packages in the database. Reason being, it's just a lot of code that is not suitable for just dumping into the source code in here. So this is what the sample application also does. It installs those packages, so you have them, and it sets everything up for you. So if you want to poke into the code, and feel free to do so, it's publicly available on GitHub. I will just pick the object browser here, and then you can start checking out the stuff. So that what we're doing here, it's split. So if you're interested, this is all stuff that's done with creating like the filter syntax for OData. This is the stuff where we pull or we look into all the metadata, find out what data is actually available, and adding the order biases in here. So if you want to poke into that, it's to be found here. If for whatever reason you want to install the packages separately and then install the plugin, that's also covered here. You have in the source folder on GitHub. Let's make that a bit bigger. You have like a set of scripts that will install everything, which is probably also a bit easier to read the sources. And then afterwards, you import just the plugin code. As said before, pretty much for starting, you're best off with install the sample application and include supporting objects. And the reason those packages, that's the reason for us saying like, install the supporting objects, please, because otherwise it won't work. Yeah, so that's a bit special on that plugin, but yeah, nothing too hard. So this was sort of like the publicly visible example sample app. Quickly run you through how to create a REST data source based on the plugin and how to use it. Doesn't feel different from using other REST data sources in that case, and that was actually the goal. And yeah, now a quick example. Yes, I know a couple of that stuff is in German. You don't need to be able to read this. Let me quickly refresh the page and check one thing. Yes, that's fine. This is just a quick showcase that we are using it for. So we as a company use Microsoft Dynamics CRM in the cloud, in the Azure cloud, to track sales opportunities and offers and stuff. That's all good for our salespeople to work with that. However, the reporting on that stuff is not that nice. I have to say, it feels slow running reporting. It's hard to combine different stuff. Like in Dynamics, it's like an opportunity and an offer are two different things. You run it with two different reports. In here, we just combine them together. And easy things like what I need to scroll down right now. Sorry, let's go to the end. Like the sums that you have down here, which are really easy to build in Apex. That's unfortunately something where you have to do a separate report in CRM. So what we are doing and what our use case is, we have all the data originally entered into a customer relationship management system. So that's what CRM stands for, where it belongs from data. But we can consume it using the OData REST plugin from an Apex application where we feel more at home, where we can do way more things like showing stuff here in a nice way, opening, linking things together, and like actually easier filters on those things. So this is a real life use case, and that also shows that specifically like Microsoft is very much into the OData stuff. Okay, probably shouldn't have filtered for that. I just kill it for now. So yeah, Microsoft is very much into that. SAP also. If you have an SAP system and a newer one, there is an option, yeah, because they also support OData v4. Good. So let's think screen sharing we don't need. Yeah, that was pretty much a quick roundup on OData.
That was great, Moritz. Thank you so much.
Yeah, maybe to just for everybody to recap. So that plugin will allow you to access a SAP or Microsoft Dynamics, as you've seen it in Moritz's example, as a REST data source. And the REST data source, once you have the REST data source, you can build your Apex components, a report. Not a problem, right? Just build a report on REST data source and you have your interactive report with filtering, with charting, everything is there. Same as for calendars, charts. If you have spatial data from a REST API, build a map region. Once you have answered the REST data source question, right, the Apex visualization is just the icing on the cake, right? Because you have everything. It's like a normal table. Perhaps just to emphasize that once more, the download, right, is best through the Apex GitHub repository, where the sample apps are, right? And there is I typically navigate. So this is the navigation which always works, right? GitHub.com, Oracle Apex, pick the branch for your Apex version, right? The plugin is available for 22.1 and higher. So you don't have to have the very latest 22.2. The plugin will also work on 22.1. Not an issue. Unfortunately, the plugin will not work on 21.2, right? Then you need to upgrade. We needed to decide for one Apex release to go with, and 21.1 had a few things in the REST service area we wanted to use here. So pick the branch for 22.1. plugins, right? And there is also this one, which I offered quite some time ago. This is a super simple example, right? If you really want to review a plugin yourself, see how it works, it's perhaps better to start with that one. That has just 50 lines of code, right? You can take an hour, go through it, right? Get the gist of it. And this is the real bit, the real stuff, right? Here is everything. And as Moritz was saying, download the zip archive of the sample app. That's the most easy and straightforward way to install the plugin and to kick the tires, right? And whenever you have feedback for us, you like it, you don't like it, something does not work, something works great, whatever you would like to tell us, right? Do so. And on GitHub, you could use GitHub for that. We are reading that stuff, right? Or reach out to us on the forums or however you like. And that's pretty much it.
Yeah. So
okay, we have
just looked into some Q&A, maybe.
Yes.
Yeah, we can pick something. So let me pick. There's a combination of like SAP HANA. I'm not sure I recall if we specifically tested against that. However, in the sample OData application, we have included a sample OData endpoint from SAP, the SAP sales order stuff. SAP claims with their HANA stuff, and especially with the S4, to have full OData version 4 compatibility. You need to, however, check what the source supports. Does it support filtering? Does it support pagination easily? They should normally, but this is something that we can't do immediately. It's like you have a specific OData source, version 4 source. You actually have to look in the documentation what that source supports. You can configure it in the plugin. That's what it is for. But, well, if you click something that is not supported on the other side, then you might run into trouble. Yeah. Microsoft uses this also. Yes, we have seen it for Dynamics CRM. The PowerPoint, not PowerPoint, what's the other? SharePoint APIs, I know, also use OData v4. In that case, it's pretty much, I haven't found that much that is not supported with OData version 4 in the Microsoft cloud stuff. So I'll just tick off the boxes here, so Jason is not always catching up with I'm answering just questions without ticking the boxes.
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
You're doing great.
And maybe let me talk a bit about that question. What are best practices? I think so. I would like to answer two questions. One is already in the answered section, but I've seen quite a few questions. Oh, can a plugin do a post instead of a get? Can a plugin send a specific authentication request and these things? So at the end of the day, it's your implementation. So or in that case, it's the OData implementation. So from the Apex engine point of view, right, if you are crafting your own plugin, right, for your own special sort of REST API with super special authentication, your plugin code can do whatever you like, right? It's your implementation. You are the developer. You are the one who sends off the HTTP request. And you basically, it's really your plugin code sending off Apex Web Service.make REST request with parameters however you like it. I've seen use cases where plugins need to do 2 requests, one after the other, immediately, right? Not just 1, 2, right? I've seen a use case where the idea is to first fetch, make a request to get the actual URL, right? Even the actual URL to invoke for the real request, right? So, but you can do whatever you like. It's your implementation, right? That's one thing. And I think that answers a lot of these questions I have seen. And the other one is, that's a very good one. What are best practices at a high level for addressing any performance issues with Apex pages using REST data sources? I would say nothing special here, right? So I would start debugging that as I would debug every Apex page, right? So turn on debug, right? Start with the normal informational debug, right? That gives you the clue where the time is spent. If you need to know it to the very detail, turn on the full trace, the level 9 debug, as we like to call it. And then you get the very fine-grained debug, and then you see where time is spent, where time is lost, and what Apex actually does. And everything else I would take from there, right? So if you find out that the time is spent between Apex kicking off the request, that's with REST, I have to say, most often it's unfortunately exactly that. Apex kicks off the request, and sometime later response comes back. It's like when you're using the browser, wanting to view the website of your choice, and it's slow today. Yeah, that happens with Apex also when it's REST. It's an external system, right? And sometimes, yeah, the network is slow. That happens often, but debug output will tell you, right? It will tell you where things are slow or where things don't work.
That's great, Carsten. Thank you for those details. We have a couple more questions here and a few more minutes if you'd like to tackle them.
Yeah, let me.
I'll just pick up on that get versus put stuff that Carsten mentioned. So that fits perfectly for OData. So OData sources support that you put all the filter stuff, all your query parameters into the body, into the request body, which then means a post in that case. And that is when you have a lot of stuff filtering. Yeah, you could run into the URL is too long, some web servers. So if your source supports that, you can tick that on. So you can actually dynamically decide based on the configuration to change a get to a post in behind the scenes. So it's your PL SQL code, or, well, it's the one that you installed from a public GitHub repo, but that can be done. Okay, let's see what we have. Oh yeah, the certificate stuff. There's not an easy answer, but that's probably something that has been lingering with using the Oracle database to access REST data sources that then want a specific client certificate for authentication. Carsten, that's something that you want to take on. I know it's a pain.
Yeah, so
maybe you have some ideas how to ease the pain.
Yeah, so at the end of the day, right, Apex lives in the database, and Apex, so by the way, that's maybe interesting for people wanting to know about backgrounds, right? So whenever Apex does a HTTP request, Apex didn't implement or invent a HTTP client on its own, right? And that's what we always do, we are making use of the real estate we have in the database, right? And the database has the UTL HTTP package, and that's what we are using. So whenever you ask yourself, how does that work? So it works like every other UTL HTTP in the database works. And certificates means UTL HTTP wants the certificate to be in a wallet, and the wallet has to be configured. Certificates for OData, so basically not an issue, right? You only have to prepare the wallet with the certificates, configure it for your database, and then you are good to go. So I understand that's sometimes not always that easy. You need a DBA for that. That's true, because the wallet lives on the database server. Unfortunately, that is as it is. There are a few helpers there, though, and I don't have the URL for that at hand, but I know that Daniel Hochleitner once built a scripting support which grabs all the certificates from Firefox and loads and converts them to a wallet for the Oracle database, right? So that you can find helpers for that. But at the end of the day, I have to say, the basic task remains the basic task, right? You need to prepare the wallet, configure it for your database. And once that is all in place, then you are good to go for your REST data sources, whether it's plugins, built-in types, or anything else.
Thank you, Carsten. That's great. We have time for one more question. Jürgen's asking, will there be more development for this plugin?
So we definitely plan on continuing development for OData, right? I can't say from here when there will be the next version for the plugin, right? That time will tell, but definitely there is a roadmap for OData support. And in the long run, we are also thinking about making what today is a plugin, making that a native component of Apex. Of course, can't tell any timeframes for that, but this is our general thinking, right?
I've written a later release. I think that was hopefully unspecific enough for inclusion as a native functionality. Yeah.
All right, thank you for that. Actually, there's one more question that maybe you can take a quick stab at from Anonymous. The API URL is stored in one of the columns in one table on the Apex REST catalog creation. Where do you write the query to get the value for the column from the table?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think it's related to a question which was raised before that, right? The idea is that all the data for your REST APIs lives in your own tables, right? And not in REST data sources as it is in our case, right? So in general, and that was my answer to the first question, a REST data source in Apex is part of your application, like a shared LOV or a template or a list list, right? So the metadata becomes part of your application and lives within Apex. If you want to store the URLs, for instance, in your own tables, right, things become a bit different. So with built-in REST sources, I have to say you won't get far, right? Because Apex has its own metadata. It's similar like driving authentication for your Apex application from your own tables, right? You need to implement pure SQL for that. And that would be actually the same answer as here, right? A plugin is your code. You can do whatever you like. So you could craft a REST data source plugin, right, which at the end of the day gets the URL from your own table, right, and performs the requests, and then uses your tables as the metadata storage, right? It would be an interesting plugin, right? That's for sure. But it's an approach which would work. Besides that, the idea of Apex and REST data sources is to have the metadata really as part of your application, like all the other Apex components as well, right?
Right. Well, thank you both for so much effort here today in the presentations and your discussion. All your hard work is really appreciated in making this plugin a reality, and it just continues to, impress everyone that uses Apex. And really, it's a great time to be an Apex developer. And I personally am very excited to start using all these features. So I hope everyone that's presented and actually been part of these calls over the last several weeks are, able to use these new features in Apex 22.2 in their new developments. In any case, there's a correction that I want to point out to the title of this session. It was Apex and OData REST data sources at your service. So if you're looking at this later, just make sure that little change. Other than that, everyone, thank you so much for your attendance. We look forward to seeing you again next week for the Apex Espanol session next Thursday with Monica. And there'll be other office hours coming up. So again, everyone, thank you so much for your time and energy today. We appreciate the questions and all the chat. We'll talk to you next time and see you later. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.